If you're like me, I'm sure you've wondered and argued over who is the most successful AFL club of all time. So today I'm going to be showing you 5 different ways of looking at it to determine who has been the most successful club of all time. So let's start by defining a couple things. First and foremost, success means winning a premiership. Since a premiership is what every team seeks to do when competing in the competition, you can't say a team was successful if they do anything other than win a premiership. Therefore, it's not about simply being good, it's about winning premierships. The second thing I would like to define is that when talking of these premierships, we are only considering senior VFL AFL premierships. No reserves or under-19 premierships and no premierships won in competitions other than the competition that is currently known as the AFL, which was known as the VFL until 1989. Meaning clubs who have won premierships in competitions such as the VFA or the Sandful can't use these as reasons for them being the most successful club in the AFL. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get on to option 1, just the premierships. As you can see, the most successful clubs when looking at just the premierships are Carlton, Collingwood and Essendon, who have all won 16 premierships. Then we have another 3-way tie at 4th with Hawthorn, Melbourne and Richmond, all on 13 premierships. Now the benefit of this option is that it's the most straightforward way to look at it and it's the most commonly accepted. However, it heavily prioritises the clubs who have been in the competition the longest, as you can see. The highest placed non-Victorian club, aside from Sydney, who used to be a Victorian club, is West Coast, who is only equal 9th. And also, I think we can do a bit better than a 3-way draw. Now, what a lot of people may think to do is rank teams based on premierships, and then if there is a draw, you split them by placing the team who has appeared in more grand finals higher, so that it would look something like this, with Collingwood on top with 16 premierships and 27 losing grand finals, followed by Essendon with 16 wins and 14 losses, and then Carlton with 16 wins and 13 losses. But the problem with this is you can't say one team is more successful than another because they get closer to being premiers more often. As stated earlier, success means winning premierships, so we need to find a better way to split this up. The first new way to look at premierships that I want to use is something called Premiership Frequency. It's quite simply a percentage of how often a club has won the premiership, and you get it by dividing the number of premierships that a club has won by the number of years that they've been in the competition. This should balance things out a little for the teams who haven't been in the competition for as long as those founding Victorian clubs. We'll call this option 2. Now we can see here Hawthorn is actually on top as they have won 13 premierships in 99 seasons, which beats Essendon, who are now in second place, who have won 16 premierships in 125 seasons, and then equal third is Carlton and Collingwood, who have won 16 premierships in 127 seasons. Once again, the top of this list is dominated by the oldest clubs, with the main exception being Hawthorn, who placed first but were not in the competition from the beginning. Though Brisbane and West Coast still place fairly high at 6th and 7th respectively. Now this option is probably a more fair option than the previous one, however it still appears to be biased towards the clubs that have been in the competition the longest. This bias comes from the fact that in the early years of the league, there were far fewer teams and it was therefore just statistically easier to win a premiership. Let's take Collingwood and West Coast for example. In Collingwood's first 28 years in the VFL, the competition consisted of between 3 and 9 other teams, whereas in West Coast's first 28 years in the VFL-AFL, the competition consisted of between 13 and 17 other teams. So clearly, it was a lot easier for teams like Collingwood to bank in early compared to teams like West Coast. So to find the most successful team when taking this into consideration, we should use option 3. Option 3 involves firstly finding the expected number of premierships for each club in their time in the league. And to do that, you take the first year that they were in the league, which for West Coast was 1987, and you find the reciprocal of the number of teams that were in the competition that year, which just means to do 1 divided by that number. And since there were 14 teams in the VFL in 1987 when West Coast joined the competition, we do 1 divided by 14. Then you go and do that for every year that club has been in the competition and then add all those numbers together. What you end up with is the expected number of premierships this club should have won in their entire time in the league. So for West Coast, that number is 2.278 premierships. Then all you need to do is take the actual number of premierships that club has won, divide it by the expected number of premierships, then you multiply it by 100, and the result is a nice percentage which represents how many premierships West Coast have won compared to how many they are expected to have won. So West Coast has a percentage of 176%, which means they've done very well. If you do this for every club, you get this as the order of most successful clubs. Firstly, we have the Brisbane Lions on 187%. Then we have West Coast on 176%, followed closely by Hawthorn on 174%, and you can see the rest of the clubs on the screen now. Now I want to move on in a bit of a different direction for option 4. I'm going to call option 4 head-to-head. What we're going to do is take every single club and make them go head-to-head against every other club to see who has won the most premierships, except we're only counting the premierships in the years that both teams were in the competition. It's like if your grandpa was trying to say he's much better at footy tipping than you because he's won all these competitions before you were even born, whereas since you've been tipping against him, you've actually won more. Let's demonstrate by taking North Melbourne and the Brisbane Lions. North Melbourne joined the league in 1925 and the Brisbane Lions joined the league in 1997. As you may know, North Melbourne have won 4 premierships and the Brisbane Lions have won 3. However, for this, we can only go off the time that both clubs have been in the competition. So in this case, we go from 1997. Since 1997, North Melbourne have won 1 premiership and the Brisbane Lions have won 3. Therefore, Brisbane wins with the full-time score reading 1-3. We then give Brisbane 4 points on the ladder and North Melbourne 0. In instances that end in a draw, like Carlton and Collingwood who have both won 16 since 1897, and Carlton and Gold Coast who have both won 0 since 2011, both teams get 2 points on the ladder. Let's repeat this process with every club going head-to-head against every other club and make a ladder with our findings. And here you have the final ladder. Hawthorn came out first with 17 wins and 0 losses, meaning they've beaten every single club in head-to-head premierships. This means that a Hawthorn supporter can say to a supporter of any other club that in the time that their 2 clubs have been in the competition, Hawthorn have been more successful. Following behind Hawthorn are West Coast, who are on 14 wins, 2 losses and 1 draw, and Brisbane, who are on 12 wins, 2 losses and 3 draws. Since this result is much more balanced between the older and newer clubs, it seems like the most accurate list and is probably the one I most agree with myself, not only because I'm a Hawthorn supporter though, of course. The only downside of this measurement is it sort of is a disadvantage to those sides that have been really successful in the past but may have dropped off in the past few years such that they're only drawing with clubs like Gold Coast or GWS. We'll finish by adding one last option by averaging out all the other options 1 to 4 to make a definitive 5th option that takes everything into consideration. So here we have option 5, Hawthorn first, then Collingwood and Essendon equal 2nd, Carlton 4th, West Coast 5th, Brisbane and Richmond equal 6th, Melbourne 8th, Geelong 9th, Adelaide 10th, Sydney 11th, North Melbourne 12th, Port Adelaide 13th, Western Bulldogs 14th, St Kilda 15th, Gold Coast and GWS equal 16th, and then Fremantle last. So those are the 5 ways I've found of deciding the most successful AFL club of all time. Let me know which option you think is the most accurate in the comments, or even if there's another way of looking at it that I haven't included in this video. That's all from me, guys. Thank you for watching and have a good one.